Hey everyone, welcome to yet another exciting episode of 60 Plus Uncensored, the show where we have real, unfiltered conversations with people over 60 who are still working, growing, living with purpose, and refusing to fade quietly into the background. I'm your host, Seb Frey, and I started this podcast because I wanted to shine a light on the people who are still out there doing the damn thing, building businesses, chasing dreams, raising hell, or just living life on their own terms. And on this call, and this on this episode, I'm very excited to have Scott Fischer, and he's with Options for Senior Living, and he is an expert in senior living. So, Scott, thank you so much for joining me here on the podcast today.
Thanks, Seb. It's great to be here. I look forward to our conversation. This will be fun.
All right, so Scott, how old are you?
62. I make the grade, right?
62 years old, and you're still out there killing it. So like, where are you from? Like, what's the Scott Fischer story like?
Well, Scott Fisher's from originally Cincinnati, Ohio. As you see over my shoulder, there's kind of an homage or a little Hall of Fame back here to the Big Red Machine, the famous Reds baseball team from the 70s that won back-to-back world championships. And so I have all my family still back home. I moved out here in the 70s. My dad took a job out here, and I've lived in Phoenix since 1979. It's 46 years probably this weekend. Awesome that it's going to be 110 or 112 again today. So we love our big heat down here. I went to nursing school at Arizona State University after bouncing around trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and I always had in my heart I wanted to do something that had some impact, that I could help people and make a good living at. And my nursing career for close to 20 years was primarily dedicated, Seb, to working with people who were struggling with mental illness, both adults and with kids. I ran residential and long-term care facilities for teenagers for, man, almost 10 years of that window of time when I was working. But in 1997, one of those kids got real agitated, and we had when I say long term, these kids lived with us like 6 months to 2.5 years. I mean, they would spend 2 or 3 birthdays with us, a lot of them. And this particular kid was having a hard time in school that day. We had a regular school on campus. I was helping bringing him back to the living quarters where the nurses stations were. And anything, it escalated. We had to put hands on this dude, and I ripped all the ligaments in my hand.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Well, that was in 1997. I had it fused in 98 because when the ligaments ruptured, there was no, at that point, there wasn't any regenerative option. So it was fuse it, fix it, and fuse it. Well, it's just led to one thing after another with this hand over the last 20 something years. But you know, when you get injured, when I got injured, and I've heard this from others, you go through a mental, like like a whole carnival of things goes off in your head. And I didn't want to work, and I didn't know what I wanted to do at that point. I'd gotten hurt. I loved what I did, but I don't know. So I got a job selling mattresses and water treatment systems, sitting in a mattress shop. Spent about 8 months figuring out what I was going to do with myself. Went back to being a nurse, but I took a job with an agency that provided nurses in the people's homes after they had largely been hospitalized for problems with their dementia. I didn't know anything about this word dementia. I was hearing about it, but I didn't really know anything clinically about dementia or the kinds of different dementias that are all involved. But I became a nurse clinician in that space, seeing people in their homes, and then little by little, I would see them on assignment in their assisted living or their senior living environment, Seb. And it was my first time ever, right? I'd worked in psychiatric facilities. Now I was in long-term care facilities for the elderly. And I went, wow. And I was at the right time. There was a new industry sort of evolving in the early 2000s. This is now 2001, 2002. And these people that we call now placement agents were now starting to run around Phoenix and other cities, helping largely discharge planners get people placed into long-term care if families didn't know where to go if their loved one couldn't stay at home. Anyways, I was involved in all of this, and I there was an opportunity to create a job or create a business. I always wanted to be my own boss. And 20 years into my career, I quit my nursing career and started a business called Options for Senior Living, which is a service to families that helps them find and research, locate, and move into the right long-term care solution when a loved one can't stay safely at home any longer. So since 2003, all I've done is this placement business for 22 and a half years now, right? It was just something to get me out of doing a job. I was sick of working at a regular 8 to 5 and wanted to be my own boss. And this was a no barrier to entry, low ramp curve. I just did it. And at 40 years old, I opened my first business, and I'm still, I always believe this, that to this day, that even though it's not easy, working for myself, the worst day is always better than the best day working for somebody else. I just love that I get to chart my own course and do my own thing, and then create all these other variations of our business to, as I've gotten more involved in the aging of our community. And I'm aging, sure, I'm 20 years down the road here. The impact of aging on our community is really of great concern to me, because like a lot of us that might be in this age group, I have parents. My mother's in assisted living now, and her 83rd birthday was yesterday, and it's emotional. It's hard to, as an adult kid, balance everything and watch the person that you've always had lose a little bit every day.
Yeah, that's tough for sure. So you started Options for Senior Living in the early 2000s, and you
Hmm.
mentioned that it was kind of a new thing at that time,
Hmm.
like the placement industry. So what was it like before that? Like before there was like a placement industry, like what happened when people needed to go and find some place they could help them out with their aging parents?
Yeah, a lot of, if we go back 25, 30 years, I think a lot of people have in their mind that senior living is really old school nursing home kinds of stuff, where you have this picture in your mind that everybody's in a wheelchair, maybe a little blanket, and it's an older, more institutional kind of a setting, wheelchairs everywhere. And that's kind of the vision I think most people had. Well, I don't know, whatever. In about that time frame, you started to see intentional senior living, either part of a campus or freestanding assisted living communities, which were there to support people in their aging, but brought good food, entertainment, a good social activity and program, all kind of under. So it was apartment living or apartment style living for folks that needed some help. Different than being in the nursing home, where like you were just so old that's where you had to go, right? So these people were now moving into assisted living. The hospital healthcare system, discharge planners at the skilled nursing and such, now had so many more choices to send people when they couldn't go home safely. Maybe they'd been in the hospital 2 or 3 or 4 times, falls and various issues, maybe pneumonia or something. And so these social workers or discharge planners were using these independent agent people like us to help them facilitate discharges. That's really kind of how a lot of it started. And the earliest people that did this were former clinicians like myself. A lot of us were social workers and nurses. And now we got to use our clinical skills in kind of a new, expanded, independent way to help family. It was really cool. The the Because of the way the model is defined and the way we get compensated, families get a free service from me, Sep. So they're always jazzed about that they don't have to pay for the work we do, but we charge the senior living community or the residential home a contracted referral fee. Well, 20 something years ago, none of this was very well disclosed. It was just kind of the Wild West. In Phoenix, there was a magazine article written about us, about these people that were these independent agents that were roaming the halls of the hospitals, working with the discharge planners, maybe even giving the discharge planners some financial incentive to use them. And then they were taking them out to these smaller residential facilities, maybe moving them around a couple of different moves to get multiple fees out of the same family. And we earned the title body broker, and it was all over town that we were the body brokers and the bounty hunters. And that was, that was not a good look for us. But a lot of people had earned it because that's exactly what we did. So the discharge planners were left to their own devices to either figure it out themselves or use people like us. And little by little, people like me saturated or seeped into the market. And it's now commonplace that if you go to any hospital or skilled nursing facility, the discharge planner is probably working with someone like me 100% of the time.
All right. So, but you said like, so they're in a hospital and they're discharge planners. And so, like, I would think that from a hospital, you would go to a nursing home rather than like an assisted living facility, or is that not the case, or how does that work?
It could go either way. Sometimes people go and they go to the nursing home for different reasons. So if they're having a recovery from an injury, an illness, a pneumonia, a surgery, a fracture, a broken hip, or something, the logical step is exactly what you just said. They would leave the hospital and their insurance would pay for rehab over at the skilled nursing facility, right? And so they would get whatever their insurance benefits allow for, usually 2 or 3 or 4 weeks in a rehab, which is one element in a lot of cases. These skilled nursing facilities might have the short-term stays for the rehab, but they also might have a long-term care unit where people that have a lot of care needs would live, on into the future. Those people are paid for either out of pocket or another source, but their Medicare or health insurance pays for that short-term stay. So, however, sometimes somebody's in the hospital and they don't need that recovery or they don't need that rehab, or they've come into the hospital and they were living at assisted living. They can return to the assisted living and maybe pick up some more of their rehab back at the assisted living. So it could go either way at the point of the hospital discharge planner. Yeah.
So how about like not at the point of a hospital discharge planner? So like one thing, like, like, okay, mom and dad are getting up there and the kids are living, like in Nevada or somewhere a little ways away, and they're getting worried about their parents and, like because they don't want to have mom fall and like break a hip, and so they want to, help them get into something they think is going to be a better, for their, aging situation. How do you know, like, where should you put your parents? Should you help them go to independent living or assisted living, or maybe they might have some kind of dementia, but it's like not too bad, and maybe they are okay being independent if they're staying with the one who maybe doesn't have dementia? Like, how do you figure out? Do you help people with that, or?
I do from the very beginning. And so when I get a call from a family directly, or I might be put in touch with the family by a hospital discharge planner, or said from a real estate professional or a financial advisor, they're working with this family, and in the story is revealed that there's someone that's aging is now causing a problem or a challenge. And a lot of times in Phoenix, we're a city. The years I've lived here is that we're a town of snowbirds. Our population drops off in the summer because it's so miserably hot. It swells in the fall and the wintertime when people come back from Illinois and Minnesota and Missouri and wherever else they lived. A lot of these people have been doing that for years, and they've now landed here full time. Well, their kids are still back in Minnesota, right? So that's exactly, I think only about 1/3 of the seniors have their adult children here in Phoenix with them. So they're here on their own on an island in a lot of respects. So the kids will call us, and I've got to do an assessment of the situation. Now, I say assessment, I've got some clinical background, but there are a lot of non-clinical people that do what I do. And so there's a lot of information gathering. We have some tools for that to help gather the details so that we can make an educated aging plan for them, a guide map for them to go down the road to what do they need. Usually in that intake or that assessment, a lot of things are revealed that they need. And so we get into all kinds of the conversation about who's got authority, where are the powers of attorney, are they up to date and appropriate for where we are. Arizona has some very weird or additional mental health power of attorney law here in Arizona. It's unique here, so I've got to go through that with people. We got to talk about money. We got to talk about what their care is currently, what their diagnoses potentially are, like an Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or diabetes or something. So I've got to know a fair amount about the situation before I just go, here's the place for you. Phoenix, in my county, the greater Phoenix area, we have over 2,000 senior living options in town. Over 2,000. There's corporate apartment style campuses, independent living community. There's all that. We have freestanding memory care or facilities that take care of people that have, various forms of Alzheimer's disease, dementia, all that. Then we also have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of small private residential homes. We call them assisted living homes. I think in California you call them 6 beds, but they're residential care facilities, and these are licensed 5 to 10 residents per home. And so we have hundreds of these all over the place, every neighborhood. So I've got to do a fair amount of homework with the family, and then I have simultaneously or in the background done a large degree of developing my own personal inventory of facilities that we're contracted with, that I have a high degree of confidence in, so that when families need us, we've got an inventory of places that we can connect them to and match them to, not just say everybody goes here, but we literally through a process seek to match families to the right best situation when they select a long-term care.
Yeah, so like how do you do that? I mean, like there's 2,000 facilities or communities. Like, I mean, you can't have an
Yeah.
encyclopedic knowledge of all of them, or
No,
can you? I mean, how do you know?
no,
Like, oh, you should
no.
go to this one
We
over here on Robinson Lane, or you should go to, Sunny Acres, or like how do you choose?
Well, we use a lot of our time. My team and I is we're all family here. The Options for Senior Living team is my wife and my 2 daughters. So the 4 of us spend a fair amount of our week visiting and revisiting the senior living operators in the various zip codes that we service. Okay, so we do a lot of homework that's unpaid. That's what we do behind the scenes, so that we have a robust knowledge of our inventory. There is no way I know 2,000 places, but I know hundreds and hundreds, and almost every corporate building in this city. I mean, the corporate owned assisted living, almost all of them, if not all of them, I've walked in. I've been in more than once. I walked in many times because I've had families that go back and tour. I stay on top of things. We also have access to the Arizona Department of Health Services annual surveys, and this is where it's all public record, but we routinely review those, Seb, so that when we think we're going to go towards this facility or that facility, we can routinely look at or get updated on their most recent results with the State Department of Health. And sometimes we see stuff and go, oh man, you can't go there for a while because they've had issues with staffing or citations with the state. It really is in our process of evaluating the facilities, we know who will take higher care needs, things like insulin injections or 2-person transfers when a heavier person has to be moved, or they have no use of their legs. Maybe they use a mechanical device we call a Hoyer lift. Sometimes facilities do or don't want to help families who have a loved one who have like a colostomy bag or a urostomy bag. Sometimes that's off-putting to people. So we know those places and how to match what we're seeing with the family to a facility that has those specific strengths to match their needs. But it's an ongoing thing. This is our profession. After 22 years, this is what we do.
So you mentioned like big corporate, communities, and then you mentioned these small residential homes. Like, is one better than the other? Like, it would seem to me that like a corporate facility would probably have more resources than a small residential home, but maybe I'm wrong. What's the
No,
dichotomy
you're
between those?
yeah, you're totally right. For someone who is still going to take advantage of a robust activities program where they come down and they're doing crafts and karaoke and they're going out on the bus and they're going to the ballet or to the baseball game, that kind of a setting, that senior that still has that level of independence and activity and social drive, a larger corporate setting, you're probably right. That's probably the right scenario if they can afford it. You go to the dining room and you sit down and order your dinner from a menu, right? And it's just this real nice experience for most people. Oftentimes, there's two real main drivers to why someone would use a smaller residential home. One might be cost. Maybe they can't afford that corporate situation, but they can afford a smaller residential setting, and the need for care is still high enough to drive the move into a facility. And so cost might drive it, number one. Number two, they might have such a care need that it's such a high level of care that in the larger corporate setting, the care staff can't get to you fast enough when you need the help, or they need to spend more time with you than they're able to under their licensing. Pardon me. And so when those care thresholds are hit, then sometimes we lean towards the assisted living home, and a small home with 7 or 10 people might be much more ideal, depending on how it's staffed and how much care is involved. I got a call just yesterday from a friend of ours. My wife and I have known this person professionally, but we've become personally good friends with her. And she shared her journey with her dad, who has advanced Parkinson's disease. And she's constantly having to be over there and intervening, and constantly, her life is completely now absorbed with managing her dad's care. So she doesn't work anymore. She's retired. She's financially good enough to be in a situation to do this, but she's emotionally completely enveloped in what's going on with dad. And as we're talking to her and she's describing the current situation, which is failing her, it's clear to Stacy and I that she really needs to consider a small home, less than 10 beds, owned and operated by a registered nurse who knows and understands all this clinical stuff that's going on with dad's um, changing changes that come with your Parkinson's disease. And so I talked to two of those nurses yesterday, and we'll probably get Allison and them to talk this week or first and next, because I think that would be the ideal way for Allison to have an ally, a trusted clinical person who runs the facility, who's got 24/7 responsibility for her dad. I think she's going to be so much happier when that time comes. So, but not every facility is run by a nurse. There's all various backgrounds that these private residential homeowners have. So, knowing the right ones and knowing which ones are run by clinicians and are they good clinicians, that's all part of what we do for families on an ongoing basis.
Okay, so is like I would have to imagine that cost is a factor. Like, is there like a big difference between like these corporate places and like the small, 10 bed, place in a neighborhood?
Yeah, I think the residential homes have a wider range. So I can still find, and it's tougher and tougher with the way things are since COVID. But I can find placement at times, rarely under $3,000, but 3,500 is sort of the bottom line now around here for where those homes want to start charging folks $100 a day or a little more. But that can go up to 12, 15 grand a month in some of these real fancy spots, master bedroom suites. We've got some very high dollar areas of Greater Phoenix, Paradise Valley, Scottsdale, where it's big money right? To live in a residential, but the swing from 3 to 12 or three, like that's the extreme. So there's a wider range. Senior living at corporate, they typically there's two charges involved that people need to know about. One is they charge you a base price for the apartment, and with it comes all of the amenities, the all three meals, transportation, the housekeeping, all of that social program, all that's packaged up in the rent, to the basic rent. And so for a studio, it might be in the high threes or 4,000. That's here in Phoenix. Other parts of the country, way higher than that. And then one bedrooms, two bedrooms, they charge you, the larger the unit, the more they charge. And then they'll add a care charge. And so, Seb, every time somebody comes into a facility, they're assessed by the clinical team, the nurse there, or the manager, and then they're assigned a care package that associates to another dollar figure. So their medication management and their care gets plugged into the top of their rent. So that $3,900 base fee is really $5,900, or you know what I mean. So it's a much higher number than what's just the rent by itself. And people need to know that they got to plug in some more numbers on top of that to get the real cost. So senior living at a corporate, you know, for a one bedroom unit, man, I pretty much minimum 5,500. Now, when you add care into it, you know, at least moderate level of care, and then it can go up the roof up to the roof.
Yeah, so do these places like do they have like increases like so like this like you check in and then like okay next year it's like 10% more or can you like
Yeah,
establish some kind of like
COVID's driven that up a little bit more too. Used to be able to say everybody 3 to 5%. It's been more like 7% annually. So people need to calculate and figure in whatever cost of living increases. Social Security typically has a cost of living increase that goes with it, so sort of helps offset. You know, if you're on a fixed income, it helps offset that, but it may not. The other thing that you have to watch carefully with when a senior moves into senior living for the first time, they might be on a low level of care, right? They only need somebody to bring them their pills and on Tuesdays and Fridays stand in their apartment while they're taking a shower. We call it standby assistance. Well, 2 years later, they could be requiring full bathing, dressing, feeding. I mean, there could be a lot more added. And as their care needs go up, that price is going to increase as well. So if families aren't financially prepared or they're not resourced adequately enough, you can, if you don't plan right, you can blow through people's resources too aggressively. And so I have to talk about all that right up front. That when we put a plan together, I'm really thinking the next 3 to 5 years. I'm not just thinking, what can we get away with doing the next 6 months? You know what I mean? I have to think forward for them and help them anticipate what's coming.
so how do people pay for this? I mean you're talking big money here. So I mean a lot of people I don't think have that kind of money lying
No,
around. They can do 5,000, 7,000, $10,000 a month to put their parents up somewhere.
yeah, 100 grand a year to do long-term care. It's staggering how much this costs. So yeah, for the most part, people, you know, and the reality is the generation, my preceding generation, did a better job for a lot of them did a better job saving than people my age. You know, those of us that are on the back end of the Gen Zers and the boomers. I'm a boomer by a couple of years, you know, but I'm on the back end of it, and so we're not as good as savers as that generation. So a lot of them do have some resources. If there's still real estate involved, Seb, that is going to be the biggest asset people walk around with. Is they bought a house in the '70s for $36,000 and now it's worth, you know, 629,000. So the money's in the ground. There's literally billions and billions of dollars worth of resources in the earth, you know, in people's owned real estate. As a realtor, you know what we're on the verge of seeing. And so if there's creative ways to tap that asset, or if the house has to be sold or liquidated, that's great. That often is what is the backstop to pay for long-term care. And then they unlock the resource to fund other legacy concerns or, you know, leaving stuff for your grandkids and all that kind of stuff that people love to do. But long term care at 100,000 a year, you know, especially if their Social Security income's only what, like 2,100 or 2,600. I mean, that's a drop in the bucket. You know, it's 25,000, and they still are short. How do they make up the difference? There are people over the years that have also bought long term care insurance, private policy, that might fill in that gap. Sep, it's it's paid for privately through like Mutual of Omaha or I won with a company called Genworth. And when I need senior living or assisted living, I have to meet some criteria. But then that policy would pay, I think, with the riders and stuff on it, maybe $225 a day for 3 years. So as long as I get my carry, as long as I don't outlive the 3 years, I'm good. So it'll help for a while, but that's like 6,000 a month that could be in that policy. There are other investments people could make along the way, but you are talking about people then when they can't, then where are the public benefits, right? Where do we get help? California has a program called Medi-Cal. Arizona has a program called Arizona Long-Term Care or Altex. Our federal government gives each state Medicaid dollars. We hear a lot about this in the news all the time about the cuts of Medicaid and all this kind of stuff. But Medicaid comes from the Fed to the state, and the state uses that through various programs to reach people who have a need. And so sometimes it's single moms that need lunch money and food support for their kids. It's aging programs. It's mental health and mentally ill programs. Well, seniors have a program that they can apply for, and not all of them qualify, but it does provide some help for long-term care that pays for assisted living. And there's a lot of people that are trying to get down that pipe right now. And it's you know, about 4 out of 5 in Arizona are getting declined on the first attempt to get through it. But it's
Wow.
there for people. Yeah. The veterans have a program called the Aid and Attendant Benefit 7, and for veterans or veteran spouses that had wartime service, World War II, Korean conflict, Vietnam, whatever, there's specific dates associated with those. There are also income benefits for those veterans and their surviving spouses. And so we go through a questionnaire with them to see if they served, and if they did, do they have the right dates? And if they do, then here's the next step we can take. And we can get a couple of $1,000s a month to help them enhance their income tax free. And that's a benefit that they're entitled to as wartime vets. So we've got to talk about all this stuff when I get into it with families, so that it's a much more complicated experience than most people think. And you know, you couple that with adult kids who are still running their own lives and working and got kids and grandkids. It's a lot to juggle.
Yeah, it sure is. And what about if people don't have a house and don't have VA benefits and are basically penniless? I mean, like,
Yeah.
can you help those people find a place, or what do they do?
You know, there's really not much I can do for them. Our our area agency on aging and another nonprofit program here in Phoenix called the Foundation for Senior Living, and I imagine in other cities there's various um, publicly funded resources that senior helplines and the area agency on aging that have various programs that can help people. But it is a problem until they can get onto the Medicaid program. It's a real problem to make that bridge. A lot of times these people get stuck, they get sick, they're in the hospital, they can't, or they don't have a home to go to, or the home that they need for support isn't there, so they have to go to senior living, but they don't have any money. And they get stuck in the hospital for weeks, because nobody can find a place that'll take them. So it is a failure of the system, and we need a more lubricated way to get people through on the public benefits when they need it, for sure. But at the same time, Medicare is never going to cover any of this because Medicare provides health insurance, like health insurance for doctors and X-rays and surgeries and hospitals. That's what because people are really shocked all the time when they go, Medicare doesn't pay for any of this. And I'm like, no, we got to, if you're going to need more financial aid, we've got to look into the Medicaid program, and we have to kind of educate them on that situation and what's the difference.
So speaking of lubrication, let's just say that like something happens, like maybe a parent took a fall in a house, and the kid's worried, and they're not so injured that they need to go into a skilled nursing facility or whatever, but they need to. It's clear that they need to get out of the house and be somewhere safe right away. Um, but like the moving costs for these places, like a nice place might be, I don't know what they charge first and last, right? Or like they have like an initiation fee or something like that. And like
Yeah,
you might be
most of
looking
them
at
have
15, 20 grand.
yeah, most of them have that initiation, or they often refer to it as a community fee. It's a one
Right.
time 5 grand, 10 grand, whatever. There's also a whole category of facilities out there some of the listeners might be familiar with, and we call them the old CCRCs, the continuous care communities, retirement communities. And those involve, we used to refer to those also as buy-in type. Maybe you've heard of this, but people pay a large entry fee, and I mean a quarter million to a couple of million to essentially acquire a contract with this facility for their independent living apartment, and then they pay a monthly fee on top of that huge entry fee that goes into it. Based on the contract, they may get none or half or a portion back of that entry fee when they terminate. But not everybody's got 400 grand to buy a one bedroom apartment. You know what I mean? And that's a pretty fancy place to live. And so most of the communities are you pay a smaller community fee, Seb. It's 5 grand, 10 grand, one time with the first month's rent. So, if your apartment's going to run you 7,500 bucks with care, and then you got a $5,000 entry fee, month one could be 12,500. Well, that's a big bite. That's not everybody's got that in the checkbook.
So what do they do? Like, okay, they have a house. Let's just say they do have a house, but they don't have, 7,500 or 10 grand liquid to move in. Do the
Yep.
communities wait? Do they say, okay, well, we see you have a house, sell that house, and we'll
Yeah.
just cover you for a little while? Or how does that work?
Yeah. Yeah, the large corporate communities won't. Now, some of them have worked with bridge loan programs for years. Bridge loan is, let's say you're going to move into this corporate operator. Corporate operator has a relationship with a national finance company, and the finance company will write them or loan them 30 grand, 40 grand to cover the first few months of all this. And of course, when the house is sold, then they pay off the bridge loan with a little interest, and they can make that deal. And that bridge loans are still a thing. I've seen more realtors get creative with financing, with investors. For if they list the house for the person, that they will forward or push forward 10 grand, 20 grand, 30 grand to do some upgrades to the house to help it sell and to get the resident out of the house. It's easier to sell the house when somebody's not in it than when they're in it. So they get the person to senior living. And then at close of escrow, that money is returned back to the realtor or the realtor's investor right at escrow. And I've seen them do that for the senior living. I've also seen the realtor involve like a move manager and an organizer to get involved, and then again it's taken out of escrow, so the family is relieved that they don't have this burden of 20 or 30 grand, or how they're going to pay for this. And so I've developed various relationships with some of these real estate companies that have these programs that their brokerages have helped them put this together, so families can tap it without having to do a bridge loan, and we can move straight ahead and move in. I've also been aware that maybe there's a husband and wife living in a house together, Seb, and wife can't afford to place the husband, but he's got Alzheimer's, he's got to go, and she can't manage him at home, but she needs to still keep in the house, and so they may be a perfect couple that would qualify for what we used to call a reverse mortgage or a HECM, the home equity conversion mortgage, where they start to take a draw out of the asset of the house in the form of a reverse mortgage. If she's going to stay there for a few years, then it might make total sense to refinance, give her some liquidity and some cash to be able to pay for his care and take the pressure off of her financially and use the asset in the house, especially if she's been sitting on it for 30 or 40 years. It's got tons and tons of equity to be able to utilize.
All right. Well, that's a good idea. Hey, so let's just say that I don't live in Arizona and I'm looking to find a place I can help my parents move into. There's a bunch of websites out there. And
Hmm.
are there websites that are good or bad? And why would you work with a website versus working with a placement professional?
I love that question. Thank you for this. This is one of my passions. First of all, yes, there are national operators that are these websites that often present themselves as being very knowledgeable, very helpful, and they advertise on national TV. And so we're familiar with maybe those brands. The reality of it is that those advisors are working remotely. They are not local advisors on the ground. They've not walked in any of the facilities they're referring you to. They have a database with contracted facilities in it. But those advisors, although they may be knowledgeable, they are not knowledgeable what's going on. So when I said a few minutes back, like me and my team, we personally match people up. There's no way to match up anything that you don't even know what you're matching them to. So we've gone in and experienced and see these facilities have an ongoing personal relationship. Those online operators do not. That's one thing. Number two, it's typical and often the experience of families that when someone fills out, yeah, please send me some information online, that information is now spread out not to two or three top choices, but it might be spread out to 6 to 15. And all of a sudden, the family who's unknowingly filled out a form looking for some information, boom, they're getting bombarded with, and I've heard this for years, man, where families are just getting bombarded by phone calls because all of these senior living communities are now being instantaneously notified by the website of a lead, and now families are reduced to leads and they're reduced to numbers and how fast can people respond to them, and they don't get the hands-on personal eyeball to eyeball sit over the kitchen table relationship and trust that comes with this is just a you know and so if you're just looking for choices and you need to know something tonight, I guess that's an okay thing. But and they do a lot of business that way. There's a lot of people too that don't understand that the way those websites market is that you could be looking for one particular facility. You know the name of it, it's right there on the corner. You could look it up online and you may not even know that you're on one of those marketing company websites instead of the one that you wanted. You would have thought you were filling out the form for that place, and you've really filled it out for a national company, and you're now being bombarded by a lot of other stuff. That is a real experience from hundreds and hundreds of families I've dealt with over the last 20 years. So I just say, listen, if you're going to Google something, don't wait. If you're talking to me, please don't. I'll give you and if you want to look at the real websites of these places and the real story behind the scenes with Department of Health, I'll get you all of that. But you often have kids that live out of state. They're trying to help their parents. So you're right. They're Googling and they're looking for stuff. And man, now they've gotten snaggled up into something. Be very cautious. That's what I'm saying. Being very cautious with all that.
Yeah. Now they're like in the lead machine and they're going to get bombarded. Like if you look at refinancing your house, you're going to, or like a solar lease or whatever, I mean, you're just going to get bombarded. Same kind of deal.
Well, you know what, if you Google like Hilton or Marriott, what's the chances are you get Hilton or Marriott? Oh, it'll be on the first page, but you're going to get Travelocity, Expedia, right? You're going to get all the travel sites before you get to, oh, there's Marriott down here. I have to go. It's like it's the same principle. They'll elevate themselves on the search list, come up top, and people are, they're briskly going through things to get the information they're hoping to get. So be very careful with the online operators. And I would always say, please do your research, find the right, best local professional, in your market. We now, years ago, Seb, there was no national best practices. There's no licensure for any of us, but I had a role in a hand in developing what we now call the National Placement and Referral Alliance. The NPRA is the National Trade Association for the placement industry. We have chapters in 33 locations. We have about 1,000 members across the nation now. All of us have now had to submit to a national best practices. We sign those, and so we are under the authority of the board of directors, and our grievance and complaint policies. So if anybody's ever thought to be outside those best practices, there's accountability. Although it's not licensure, it's a voluntary accountability to our national board and our local chapters. So if people are looking, go to the NPRA website and find an agent in your market that is associated or affiliated with the NPRA. That'd be the best place to start looking for the best guys like us.
So, within NPRA, like, is there anything that, like, if you go to NPRA, you find some people, like, not everyone's the same. Is there like a way to like evaluate the people who they find on NPRA, or are they pre-vetted, or?
They're not vetted, and again, you've got people that have signed these best practices, and they're only as good as their word. Do look for their Google reviews. Do look if they have a Yelp or Google My Business page. Please look at their websites. Make sure that that they're experienced. Look, there's also people that have entered into this space that have no clinical background, no experience, whatever. It doesn't mean you can't learn it, but there are national brands like we have national brands like Assisted Living Locators and Care Patrol and Senior Care Authority. Those are franchises that people buy. So they spend 75, 80 grand to buy a franchise. And now you are the local expert. Well, 2 weeks ago, you could have been an electrician. And now you're a senior living advisor. Now, what makes you an expert? So I tell families, make sure that they're part of the NPRA, but also interview the person. Who's referring you to that person? How long you've been doing this? How long is your business? How many families like us have you helped in the past? Those are real questions to ask people. You know, we have a weird business that I help families and I do the best I can. When I'm done, I've helped them find the right long-term care solution, and I emphasize care. If their loved one needs stuff and that care facility is not providing meals on time, they're screwing up their medicines, they're not supervised well, there's all these issues, then there's a care failure over there. Well, that's related to potentially, like, I didn't have anything to do with the care failure, but if I'm reckless about where I place people, or I'm not doing my homework, or even just happens, there's a connectivity to that I'm really concerned about, because I lose control of the outcomes of my business. And so you really want to work with an agent who's got a track record at this and can point you to other families that they've served and helped, as well as those national associations that they've got their insurance. In Arizona, we're required to be fingerprinted and background checked so that we can work inside the healthcare system, because we're working with vulnerable people every day.
So you mentioned like Care Patrol and these other franchises where you can find a senior placement specialist, but they may not be qualified whatsoever because they were an electrician 2 months
Yeah.
ago. Like, what about like the Society for Senior Advisors? Are they a place to go to look for placement specialists?
Yeah, they could be. So the Society of Senior Advisors is I'm such an advocate of what they're doing, and we're going to be at their conference just coming up this week in Baltimore, Maryland, supporting the training and education and that goes on. They provide a wonderful wealth of support and information and a certification that supports people who work in the space where families are aging, their clients are getting older. There's a large movement, obviously, because as the nation is aging, there's a huge interest in helping people age in place safely, right? That's a big deal. How to help people stay at home safely. On the other hand, there's a whole group where that's not reality. We got to go this route. We got to find a place. So the CSAs provide a lot of support and fundamental education for people who may be changing careers or moving into this aging care space, but it's not industry specific to placement. So it's great information. My one daughter's taken the CSA. My next daughter, who just joined the company, is going to be taking her CSA program this month because I want her to have that foundation. So the CSA organization may know people who are placement agents who have or carry their certification, but it is not an industry specific. The NPRA does offer an industry specific certification, Seb. It's called the CPRS, the Certified Placement Referral Specialist. So on the NPRA website, those people that carry that certification, the CPRS, they're designated or highlighted on there too, and you can find they have a little more. They've taken the time to take the test and demonstrate the experience needed to pass that test.
All right. Well, that certainly is much better than nothing, which I think is what you get
Yeah,
a lot of the time.
for years it was nothing, man. And I was in a meeting in 2010 here in Phoenix at the Area Agency on Aging, where the ombudsman, the Department of Health, the Attorney General's office were complaining about these body brokers, and literally, man, the ombudsman wagged her finger at myself and my buddy Rita, the two placement people there. She said, "Somebody needs to do something about you damn placement people." And because it was so egregious to some of the behavior and conduct and practices that were being seen. And so we started a group in Phoenix that was sort of the first chapter, later became the first chapter of this NPRA. And so for 8 years, I led that group in Phoenix, and then that helped us get started with the National Alliance so that it's now a thing across the country. But it was in response to the community going, "You guys suck." Really, there's a lot of bad dudes doing this, and because there was no oversight, we had to do something and create standards and best practices that people could follow. And so that's what we started, and I'm proud that there's now, like I said, 1,000 members nationally and 33 chapters.
Yeah, that's very impressive. All right, Scott, we got to wrap this up here. If people want to get a hold of you to maybe look for a place in the
Yep.
Phoenix area, or are you statewide, or where do you
I,
serve?
I largely serve the greater Phoenix area and some of the surrounding areas. We have some surrounding counties like Yavapai and Pinal County. Maricopa counties are our big center where Phoenix is at. I'm also, because of my role with the NPRA and some of the things that I've also do with some national training and groups I'm a part of, I've got a pretty broad reach to folks all over the nation. And so if people reach out to me through my website, there's a contact me there. My website is optionsforseniorliving.com. Optionsforseniorliving.com. My email directly is scott@optionsfsl.com. There's a contact button on the website. You have a question, reach out to us. I'm happy to visit with anybody or help point people in the right direction to get the right resource. As I said, I'm an adult child living the reality of helping my mom while I still, I got a 3-year-old granddaughter and little granddudes, and it's very taxing to love and have 4 generations of us going at one time. So my heart is for those guys that are the adult kids that are feeling this. I'll leave you with this. We have a saying around here that for all those of us that are in this spot, man, we say all the time, it's our turn now to love and care for those who love and cared for us. And I believe that it's our turn now. I'm very grateful to my parents and want to return that gratitude with being the best I can for mom and the last stage of her life here.
All right, terrific. All right, Scott. Well, hey, thank you so much. I really feel like we could talk again for days on this. I think
Me
we just
too.
barely scratched the surface here a little tiny bit, but I'm looking forward to meeting you in a couple of days here in Baltimore.
I'll see you in Baltimore. I really appreciate the time to visit. Let's do this again, okay?
All right, terrific. Thanks, Scott.
Subscribe now